Thank God it's Friday. The 5-day run ends today, but just for this week, we'll start off again next week. So let's do Friday business on Business Morning here on Channels Television. I'm Ini John Mekwa. Let's start from the commodities market. Chicago wheat futures slid for a fifth session on Thursday, pressured by soft export sales, a stronger dollar, and continued exports from Ukraine. Soybeans firmed after better than expected export sales last week, indicated strong demand as U.S. harvest nears, while corn traded near even. Economic uncertainty also hung over grain markets as investors assess recession risks and analyze minutes from the U.S. Federal Reserve's July policy meeting. The most active wheat contracts on the Chicago Board of Trade, 31.5 cents to $7.49 a bushel, reaching the lowest on a continuous basis since the 3rd of February. CBOT soybeans SVI gained 15.25 cents to $14.05 a bushel, while CBOT corn CVI ended 3.75 cents. And from there, we go to the oil space, where prices edged higher in early trade on Friday, extending a rally into a third day as investors weighed hopes for strong fuel demand after a larger-than-expected drawdown in U.S. crude stocks, pushing off worries about a global economic slowdown. Brent crude futures climbed 7 cents to $96.66 a barrel after settling 3.1% higher on Thursday. U.S. West Texas Intermediate crude was at $90.65 a barrel, and that's up 15 cents, following a 2.7% increase in the previous session. Still, the benchmark contracts were headed for weekly losses of about 1.5%. U.S. crude inventories fell sharply as the nation exported a record 5 million barrels of oil a day in the most recent week, with oil companies finding heavy demand from European nations looking to replace crude from Russia. Well, from there, we come to Nigeria. The Minister of Finance, Mrs. Zainab Ahmed, has put the 2023 budgeted daily payment for fuel subsidy at 18.39 billion naira. According to the minister, this was calculated using information provided by the NNPC Limited and the regulator. This information, she says, shows that 64.96 million liters of petrol per day is the projected average daily truck out. The minister stated this during an investigative hearing of the House Ad Hoc Committee, which is investigating the petroleum subsidy regime from 2017 to 2021.
The House Ad Hoc Committee on Subsidy meets with the Federal Inland Revenue Service over tax generated from fuel subsidy payments. The FIRS begins by stating that it is only responsible for revenue generation via tax collection and not expenditure.
FIRS do not have the record of what these funds are used for by the 3 tiers of government.
As the meeting progresses, the Minister of Finance, who had failed to honor a previous invitation, joins and gives details of how much has been spent on subsidy.
The total sum of 6.210 trillion, that is the 4.4 trillion plus the 1.774 trillion, was expended on PMS under recovery by NNPC, as well as payment of subsidy to independent oil marketers from 2013 to 2021. Payments that have been made to independent oil marketers for subsidy were directly from the domestic excess crude account through the redemption of sovereign debt instruments. It is also important to note that there were instances where funds were transferred from the Consolidated Revenue Fund to the domestic excess crude account for subsidy payments, 413.363 billion, which was provided through short-term funding by the Central Bank of Nigeria.
The Finance Minister also gives the 2023 projection for daily petrol consumption.
The average daily truck out will be 64.96 million liters per day. That's about 65 million liters per day, using an average exchange rate and open market rate of 448 naira and 20 kobo, and then a regulator pump price of 165 naira per liter. The total amount of subsidy per day is 18.397 billion naira per day.
this figure is overblown. And I feel the ministry should have done the due diligence to be able to arrive at the, a relative acceptable consumption rate.
Till next week, as lawmakers look to continue their meetings with the marketers and regulator to confirm or otherwise the figures presented by the Minister of Finance. Terry Ikumi, Channels Television News.
So help me God.
So from all subsidy in Nigeria to sustainable development, sustainable development has been defined as development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. Achieving this has been largely connected to the 17 Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. But how are corporates in Nigeria keying into this? We have a chair in sustainable finance and governance at European University Institute, Professor Kenneth Amishi, joining us from Owerri, Imo State capital. Good morning, Prof. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me. Good morning.
Good to have you, Prof. So we see, we hear of droughts, disturbing crops in Turkey, extreme weather in Europe, shrinking water levels in Germany, flood in Nigeria. How connected is this to sustainable development?
Yeah, sustainable development is a very broad agenda, as you'd imagine. So you have the environmental side of things, you have the social, you also have the governance. So the climate issues you mentioned or the environmental issues will come under the broad perspective of environmental sustainability. So yes, they apply to the sustainable development goals.
So when we say sustainable development and corporate, what role do they have to play? Because we hear now it's not just about environment, it's about corporates putting this into their plan, into their development, into their operations, because they can also be adversely affected by some of these impacts that we see.
Yeah, I think it'd be nice to move back and then ask ourselves what is the purpose of the Sustainable Development Goals? So the goals are about a progressive development, progressive agenda, which says leave no one behind. So it's also about inclusive development. So in that regard, it's kind of looking at the different challenges the world is facing today. And the SDGs have found a way to put them together. So, and if you put all those problems or challenges together, what they suggest is that they are very complex. So they will require multiple actors to deal with. So governments alone can't deal with these goals and challenges. Neither would it be possible for a civil society alone to do so. So in that regard, it requires what we may describe as collaborative governance. And collaborative governance here means that we need the different actors, government, civil society, and businesses to be part of the solution. So that's how the corporates come into it. So businesses exist in society, they need to contribute beyond the value they add to production. They also need to contribute to a better world, a better environment. And that's why and how the private sector is required to participate in achieving the Sustainable Development Goals.
How receptive can we say that Nigeria's corporates have been, to this SDGs and sustainable development? How receptive have you noticed?
It depends on how you frame it, and I would say it is a journey, and it's one that started far back in the early 2000s, where we are looking at CSR, corporate social responsibility. Then you would imagine that people had things like philanthropy, right? Philanthropy is still there today, but we have moved away, or we moved all the way from philanthropy to corporate citizenship. Today, people are talking about corporate sustainability, and even the idea of ESG, environmental, social, and governance factors involved. So the point is that companies in Nigeria are warming up to it. They are connecting, but again, it depends on the language used. So how it is framed also matters. There are companies who are still struggling with the idea of corporate philanthropy on one hand and corporate sustainability on the other hand. So I think I will see it more as a spectrum, and different companies are at different stages on this journey. So some connect to it, some are still struggling with it. But one thing that is important, or one thing we have noticed through research, is that companies that are very much exposed to the global trends, companies that interact with the global world, are likely to be much more interested in the sustainability agenda. So in that case, it depends on where you are on the value chain. And also where you are in terms of your understanding of the sustainability journey. So in a nutshell, I would say companies in Nigeria are responding to it, but not as much as you want them to do. Want them to do more, but they're still making progress.
So what do they lose by not connecting to this sustainable development?
You can look at sustainable development goals from different perspectives. And what I've advised companies to do is to move away from the idea of sustainable as an add-on, something we do after we have done our strategy, something we do as an afterthought. So see sustainability as a space for innovation, as a space for creativity, as a space for opportunities. But even if you don't want to see it from that perspective, the other view is to see it as a space for risk management. If you are, say, for example, an oil and gas company, you should also be thinking about the potential risks and also what investors are saying about the sector in terms of the environmental impact and also in terms of the overall climatic or climate change impacts of oil and gas or fossil fuel. So the companies that see that as a risk can begin to prepare themselves for a future that is greener and a future that is more into renewable. So that's one way to look at it. So, and the other way is to have an integrated approach. Let it be a lens through which you see a strategy, a lens through which you implement, as opposed to something that you consider after you have constructed this grand strategy. So sustainability in itself should be a strategy, it should be a lens through which corporations can achieve their performance. Because corporates are very much interested in profit, they're very much interested in performance. Then the question is, how can sustainability be that route or route through which you qualify your performance or your success? And the more integrated it is, the more successful you will be, the more resilient you will be as well, because sustainability is about adaptability and working with the times as opposed to working contrary to it.
Yeah, I guess another message we could also preach along that line would be, if you don't practice it, then your existence in the future is threatened, because resources will keep depleting and you may not even have raw materials for existence tomorrow.
Exactly, that's the point. That's where the risk management part of it comes in. So think about your sustainability, being there in the long term, because that's also the other aspects of sustainability that is often mentioned. But in order to be there in the long term, you need to adjust, you need to adapt to the current reality, and also to align yourself with the global trend or the future trend. So in that regard, so what you want to do is also make sure that you are taking into consideration your risk. I'll give you an example, if you have the time. Think of say you're a bank and you have like 700 branches across Nigeria. A typical bank in Nigeria might be spending about 1 million naira on diesel as we speak, or even much more, given that the price of diesel has gone up. So imagine that you have about 600 branches across Nigeria and you spend 1 million naira on diesel every month. So basically you're spending 600 million naira on a monthly basis. And if you project it over a 12-month period, you're spending 7.2 billion just buying diesel, pouring it into your generator and burning it. So over a 10-year period, you're looking at 72 billion naira. If you're an investor, you'll be worried about that company, for example, but it also provides an opportunity for a company to save money through alternative sources of energy. So sustainability thinking in that regard helps you to rethink what we may see as a conventional everyday practice. So it's as basic as that, and that's why we are saying companies should see it as a space for innovation, a space that would enable them manage risk, and a space that will also enable them to enhance their performance. Sustainability is performance, and it's not contrary to it.
Yeah, but Prof, it seems at this time that the implementation of this sustainable development is left to be voluntary. So you see corporates decide if they want to do it or not, but eventually the consequences affect everyone, including even those who are not in the corporates. You know, so how can we make this become more compelling or get their buy-in even more? Because, I mean, the example you gave, for instance, yes, you're talking about the cost, but we can also look at the health. burning of that generator into the atmosphere affects everyone who uses that area. We talk about climate change. We talk about what it's doing to the atmosphere and all of that. So how can we make it more urgent, a message for corporates to embrace?
Yeah, I think one way to look at it is to think of corporate sustainability as management of impacts. And corporate impacts can be both positive and negative. So to the average person or layman or lay person on the street, I would say sustainability is simply about reducing your negative impact and enhancing your positive impact. And corporations understand their negative impact. They also understand their positive impact. But what are they doing about the negative impact in particular? And you've already alluded to those, say, for example, environmental impact that may have a knock-on effect on health, air quality, for example. So, but the question now is, how do you govern the management of negative impact, which brings in, again, the point I made earlier about collaborative governance. Not everything can be handled by strictly government regulation, but there is a place for government regulation. But government regulation doesn't always need to be draconian. Government can also create incentives. Say, for example, companies might not be investing in renewable energy today, but what policies, what incentives can the government provide to enable funds to go into the right places that will be good for the environment and for our health in particular? So the point there is that there's always this tension: do we go voluntary or do we use regulation? I would say it would be a combination of both. Sometimes also companies want to do it voluntarily because they want to kick the can or the ball into the long grass. So that's a kind of an escapist strategy. But if you're thinking about sustainable development, that is about inclusion, that where no one is left behind, then we need to go towards collaborative governance, where we have a combination of hard regulation, soft regulation, and voluntary compliance.
Yeah, well, I guess if we want to follow that compliance, we also have to see what the government itself is doing. Is the government even conscious of it, to even start with? Because that's where most of the regulation will come from.
That's a fair point. I remember doing a piece about 4 or 5 years ago, and I was asking whether financial regulators in Nigeria are ready for sustainability. Because you can't ask companies to do what you can't do. That's hypocrisy. So government institutions, government regulators, they also need to imbibe the spirit of sustainability. So if you go to our government offices today, to what extent can you hand on heart say that they're following the principles of sustainability? But what is also happening, which is also positive if you look at it from that perspective, is that we have the office of I think at the presidency, there is an office that is into sustainability and the sustainable development goals. I can also see that in different states in Nigeria, you have the SDG offices. So it's been nice to see what these offices are doing and how they are helping to mainstream sustainability thinking and practice into government. I think that's the bit that is missing at the moment. We focus so much on sustainability in the private sector and amongst NGOs, but we hardly talk about that in the government circle. So it'd be nice to see how governments as organizations are also practicing sustainability, because you can't ask companies to do what you can do. That's simply bizarre.
Exactly. That's a very good observation about the SDG office. Even from the federal to the sub-national, we do have them. It would be nice to know exactly what they're doing and what agenda they are pushing, or what they are practicing, actually, before we expect the private sector to embrace this into their operations.
Yes, that's a fair point. But another aspect I think we are missing is also the change, the management, the mindset approach, where sustainability needs to be embedded in our curriculum, or curricula, as depending on how you look at it, from primary school, kindergarten to university. Again, the universities are missing in this conversation. It would be nice to see what NUC, in particular, National University Commission, is doing. It would be nice to see what the Ministry of Education is doing and how the Ministry of Education is using our schools to mainstream sustainability. Sustainability shouldn't be an afterthought. So in many countries we would like to emulate, they have found ways to embed sustainability in their curricula. So it'd be nice, again, in our own context. And if sustainability is to become a way of life, a culture, so to speak, then there is a place for education in that. And our educational system should be able to plug in that gap especially the higher education institution. It would be nice to see exactly what universities are doing in relation to their carbon footprint, in relation to inclusion, in relation to equity, in relation to corruption, and the like, as you would find in some other countries that would like to emulate.
What about individuals, Prof? What are some of the responsibilities of individuals in all of this?
I mean, it's a multi-layered approach here. So I know sometimes when I engage with corporates and we talk about sustainability, and then people tend to say, well, it can also speak to me in my home, bring it down to the household level. Even how we separate waste, right? How we use electricity. How many of us leave the room and switch off the light? You may say, well, I don't have electricity then to think about switching off the light. But if you leave it on, then you are impacting on the environment. Think about plastics. How much plastic do we consume? Where do we dump or drop this plastic? If I want to buy a piece of tie, do I ask questions about where it's come from? So there's a role for individuals as well in terms of in terms of how individuals can be part of the solution. Well, I think we also need to go back to the point I made earlier about incentives. What incentives do we create for individuals to participate? You walk into certain companies today, into their buildings, if you leave the room, because they have sensors, the lights will go off. So we need to also make sustainability or the sustainability practice and mindset and culture easy for people, so that people don't go about with this guilt feeling that they are not sustainable. Once people begin to feel some level of guilt about sustainability, they're going to switch off. So the whole idea is to find a way to make it as inclusive as possible, carry people along, but make it easy for them. So yes, I agree there's a role for individuals, but that role will need to come from more awareness and also more incentives to enable this sort of shift and change we would like to see.
Yeah, but Prof, when you talk about waste, I would say at least in Lagos, where we are, there's been a lot of messages about what waste, indiscriminate dumping of waste is doing to our waterways and how it's affecting us whenever it rains, all the flood that we see. This message has been preached for years. If not in any other place, I know in Lagos State, but it seems not to be sipping down, to the mind of you still see a lot of people who look sophisticated, eat in their car and throw it off, on the road, so I don't know how we're going to get this message down to people's minds.
I don't know, can you still hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me, Prof?
Yeah, I can hear you. And talk about sustainability and IT systems.
I was talking about
this kind of a classic example of it. So the point you made is correct about individuals and what they can do, but you can also think about, so again, goes back to the culture we talked about. If we have to be aware of life, people need to have the awareness. People need to understand what their everyday practices are having implications on sustainability at a societal level. So without that connection, it makes it difficult. But the other key point is that sustainability is also about discipline. And the ability to withhold ourselves, to change the way we do things. And say, for example, if I have a bottle of plastic, I should not throw it out of my car window. So you see that happening in Lagos. Why should someone do that? So it requires that awareness, as I mentioned, but it also requires a level of discipline. And a disciplined mind can make sustainability easy for everyone. So yes, there is a place for individuals, but I also believe that we need to see sustainability as a system-level change that would require us thinking through the different paths, knowing that individuals are only elements within that broader system. They will need incentives, and these incentives will need to also reinforce the interaction between individuals and others. So it's much more complex than it appears to present. But I think, again, going back to our educational system, going back to compliance as well as to regulation, might be different ways to make this work. But sustainability is a complex issue, and the world globally, we are grappling with it, and hopefully we make progress before 2030.
All right, Professor Kenneth Amaechi, Chair Sustainable Finance and Governance at European University Institute. Thank you so much for your time this morning. So so we will preach that message here on Channels Television and hope that it really gets through, and then we see sustainable characters, you know, for sustainable living in Nigeria. Well, let's take a break now. When we come back from that break, special economic zones will be our focus here in Business Morning on Channels Television. Watching Business Morning here on Channels Television. The Minister for Industry, Trade and Investment, Osunbani Adebayo, has estimated the cumulative investment in the 30 years of operations of the Free Zone Scheme in Nigeria at $20 billion. That's enough money to boost our foreign reserve. Now, according to Mr. Adebayo, in 2021, a Free Zone generated $250 billion in both foreign and local direct investments. That is $5 billion in customs duty payments and $65 billion in local import and backward linkage. However, records now indicate that of the 42 free trade zones in Nigeria, only 25 are active, with 15 of them operating in Zone A, 4 in Zone B, 5 in Zone C, and 1 in Zone D. And the issue here is the challenge of infrastructure. Well, we have to delve into this. Mr. Femi Awofala, the Chief Executive Officer of Brickstone Africa, joining us here in the studio. Good morning, Mr. Awofala. Thank you so much for your time.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm great. You're welcome. So this free trade zone, how effective is the scheme? Is it just on paper? Do you know them?
Okay, so basically, I mean, free trade zones have been existing in Nigeria for a couple of years. Way back when we had the Lekki Free Trade Zone that was inaugurated over 15 years ago and things. And the whole essence is basically to bring trade and manufacturing and processing under a one-stop shop, so as to share infrastructure and be able to provide exports, right, easily for the participants in itself. Now, over a couple of years, right from even the military era, pre-1999, there have been more free trade zones, applied to, included in Nigeria. We have the Onne Free Trade Zone, the Calabar Free Trade Zone, and a number of things. But the key issue here is, what is the government commitment, to making those zones happen? Because at the end of the day, there is need for you to have power where you're providing your manufacturing activities. There's need for you to have mobility in terms of transportation, in terms of logistics, and a number of other things. So is it that the people who are meant to be in the free trade zones are shying away? Is it becoming more expensive to operate in a free trade zone and rather just operate in your own land area, buy your land and build your factory? Mm-hmm. So those are the issues that I think that government has not really paid clear attention to. But the key thing is that they are here to stay. We have the Africa Free Trade Agreement, which will help to, a number of African countries to have more capacity or more industrialization needs. So even apart from Nigeria, you're going to have more of these, trade zones located in different nodes in Africa. But the key thing about it is the fact that, are they competitive?
Yeah, because I think the idea of the free trade zone is to make it easier for people to do business. Yeah. So they're supposed to have, as you noted, power, infrastructure.
Correct.
That'll make it so you don't have to start thinking about how do you get the raw material from here to here. Mm-hmm. So perhaps you have even a chain of provider of raw material from one stage to the other. That's why I ask, how effective is this scheme? Because we know the Lekki Free Trade Zone, for instance, let's look at the road to that.
Yeah.
How good is that road there?
Exactly.
How convenient is it for manufacturers, to say, oh, I would like to locate here because at least I have infrastructure, I have power. I think they're still providing power for themselves.
Yes, they're still. Yes.
So, I mean, how effective is this scheme at the end of the day?
You can't, well, I can't really score it in a way, but I can tell you that the objective is okay. It's a good development, but it hasn't been that effective. That's just the first point of view, because one, you still have more manufacturers who are meant to be in free trade zones, not located in free trade zones. They are located in their own industrial estate in Ikeja, in Apapa, in other areas in Ogun State and things, but they are still the kind of manufacturers or the kind of, let me say, tenants who should be located in free trade zones.
I guess the incentive
is not. So the incentive is there, but however, maybe the process. And okay, so let me just go into what I think the issues are.
Okay.
One is the fact that most free trade zones in Nigeria today are not. They don't have a very strong business case for mobility. So the key thing is this. I'm bringing my goods and services, my labor, and every other thing to the free trade zone, even though there might be some shared infrastructure. But the road to get into the free trade zone is unmotorable. And if I have to finish doing my production, I need to export it. Now, there's no ports. So there are only about 3 or 4 free trade zones in the country today out of these 15 or 50 you mentioned, right, that have port facilities. And if you're going to deal with trade, the first business case for a free trade zone is what is the mobility? How do people move the inbound and outbound logistics out of that zone? So if you have a free trade zone in an inland area that is landlocked, that doesn't have water, or that doesn't have a real serious access in terms of maybe air transportation, maybe it might be close to an airport and things, you are going to lack tenants. You are going to lack the viability you determine to achieve. Secondly is the fact that there are other free trade zones that are based on raw materials. So for example, because you have gas, you have a number of free trade zones in the southeast, on the south-south, because of the gas nature in itself. But at the end of the day, you also find out that the raw material is just in situ. The raw material is not available via a pipeline, is not available. So you are in the free trade zone, you have to now go develop a pipeline from about...
To connect to the raw material.
To connect to the raw material. That shouldn't be your business. So government should have looked at, okay, we're going to have a free trade zone here for energy producers, for people to produce fabrication, and they need gas, they're going to produce power and a number of other things. The government itself, as part of their incentive, needs to get the raw material to where the free trade zone is. The third thing which is really challenging also is the manpower. Because one is there are a number of specialized issues or specialized production that the free trade zones are provided, but do we have the manpower in terms of the skills to actually operate in a free trade zone as a producer of contact lenses, for example? You know, you probably still have to fly in. So when you go to some free trade zones you have in Nigeria, you have a lot of foreigners there. But you're like, why are we having free trade zones and we have a lot of foreigners in situ in the free trade zone when we should have, you know, the locals actually being built with capacity, being able to work on it in itself? So those are the 3 things that have not made it effective. The level of effectiveness is not yet there because also is the fact that also the cost of entering a free trade zone, I mean, they charge in dollars. I'm sure you're aware, to even locate your application, to incorporate your special purpose, your special enterprise, your special zone enterprise company, because they have their own kind of jurisdiction in terms of special zones. So you also will have to have some level of foreign exchange because they expect foreigners, or sorry, international investors, foreign direct investors to come in. But sometimes in a free trade zone, you can be a local Nigerian company and you feel that the best way for you to operate is within a free trade zone and you are being charged in foreign currency.
Foreign currency. And you know, if we're talking about boosting our non-oil exports.
Correct.
Even if the minister is talking about making $20 billion, correct. I mean, if we do not have this infrastructure, then this may just end up being just a figure on paper.
Correct. I can tell you that for free because the key thing, as we said earlier, is number one is that mobility. So Ogun State has a free trade zone, for example, inland, locked within the Shagamu Interchange Expressway.
I think they have gas working for them in that area.
Yes, but the gas is not in situ. That's what I'm saying. So the gas might be about 1 kilometer away. Maybe I think Shell has a line. But the question is, who is responsible for bringing the gas to the free trade zone? That's always what's happened. So they're like, say, oh, we're looking for investors. We're looking for people to come and develop the infrastructure. So there are 2 levels of, let me say, participation. One is, am I interested in investing in the free trade zone as a master plan, as a global entity? Or am I interested in being a tenant in the free trade zone and just do my own activity? We've had a number of interests in Nigeria over the last 10 years of people who want to tenant or who want to situate their manufacturing concerns within the free trade zone. But however, the free trade zone themselves don't have what we call a global developer who they will partner with to develop the whole infrastructure in terms of the roads, the power, the gas, the raw materials.
Isn't that supposed to be the plan of the government?
Correct. That is really where the government needs to come in. they need to come in such a way as to provide that enabling environment for that private sector developer to partner with them across the zone in its entirety. But the question now is this, is how much does the private sector want to do? How much also does the government want to do? Now, it's also a chicken and egg thing, because sometimes you're like, okay, who are the tenants who want to come to the free trade zone? And why should I develop this level of infrastructure? But sometimes when you look at the growth aspirations as a government, there are some things you just get done because you believe that this is a good location, it has a seaport, it has good mobility. Let's provide 100% power there, even though we have like 10 tenants for now, right? But let's have that aspiration to develop. So that's political, or let me say, the economic decision making to say this is a very strategic zone. Come rain, come sunshine, we need, so like a Lekki Free Trade Zone, even though it's now coming to fusion because of the Dangote refinery and the ports are just being built and things, it's now you now start going to have the Free Trade Zone becoming, you know, a more an attractive destination.
It sounds to me like you're saying that if the government is not able to, on its own, create the master plan, you know,
Correct.
the environment, they can also partner the private sector.
Correct, yes.
You know, because, I mean, there's rent to be made from there.
Yeah.
So private sector wants to make profits, so
Correct, exactly.
they can obviously make profit from the rent.
Correct, yes. And the other thing about it is the fact that even though for the private sector to come in, then the private sector needs to understand the economics of that free trade zone. So if you locate a free trade zone in a landlocked area, you yourself, you may not be able to bring out the economic viability of that zone because 1, there's no mobility, 2, there's no access to power, 3, there's no access to pipelines and a number of other things. So some of these free trade zones that are, or let me say special economic zones, so to say, that are created, they need to be looked up, they need to be looked at all over again and really confirm that can this zone be taken to the next level. Now, that doesn't mean you need to cancel the zone. What it just means is the fact you need to create what will be the mobility requirement. So if I have to come and produce here and produce my goods and services, do I have access to go into a port and export it to Tanzania, or do I still have to transport it down to Lagos and get to Apapa port before I export it? So the question is this, is what exactly is the strategy behind the zone initially? Some zones, because of the mobility access or the mobility advantage they have, it's easy for them to actually execute on this number of things. Then also, you don't have issues of land issues. So a number of these free trade zones are already were land that were owned by indigenous people. Right. When I say indigenous, I mean the locals.
The locals, yes.
Sometimes you have the state government having acquired the land. The federal government is saying the land is still is for the state government. The locals are fighting and things. So if you do the due diligence among a number of zones, a number of them are in courts regarding land issues and land rights in itself. So there needs to be some level of clarity, because at the end of the day, if I'm situating my facility on a plot of land that is under dispute, right, then I don't have any incentive to say if there's a court judgment tomorrow and they say, oh, this land does not belong to this zone again, it belongs to this local family, and I have to go and pay them money again, you know. So
if at all, they don't just tell you to quit and take your things away from that.
Exactly, yeah. So those are the things, and more importantly, I feel government, I mean, both this government and the new government, or whoever comes in, needs to really pay attention to how do we get Nigeria into these special economic zones, but in a more practicable strategy. So, for example, every state in Nigeria wants to have a free trade zone because it's a nice to have. It shouldn't be, right? You as a state can say, you know what, I don't think I'm landlocked. I don't have the necessary transportation infrastructure. I can't really be a zone. I don't think any zone will be viable here because of mobility. Maybe I should just be a production, a raw material play to say.
And connect to another zone and feed your raw materials into that zone.
Those are the things that, you know, it becomes a political nice to have to say, oh, we have a free trade zone too and things. Then the issues of financing those zones at the master plan level, at the master plan infrastructure level, there needs to be some level of way to guarantee investors of their returns. Now, it could be things about, okay, you know what, we're going to bring in all manufacturing entities there, then the zones have to really also work hand in hand with people like IFRS and taxes. So sometimes there's still a bit of gray area because your employees...
Yeah, because they're supposed to enjoy some kind of tax holiday in the free trade zone.
But if you work in a free trade zone, where as an you still have to pay payee because you are moving from one you have moved from your house to come and work in a free trade zone, you are still a resident of that community, of that state. So the state government wants to still charge you taxes. Secondly, the fact that you still have to pay some level of VAT because you're also buying goods and services. Maybe you might not pay VAT in terms of when you export and things, but at the end of the day, when you look at the numbers in terms of you operating not within a free trade zone, from a taxation perspective, you tend to be more advantageous for you to be out there just because you want to just meet the normal tax requirements. So the question now is, how much level of interrelationship do these free zones have with the federal inland revenue? In terms of, you know what, we are saying tax-free, it is tax-free. From A to Z. Your employees are tax-free, you're not paying anything, you're not paying any VAT, you're not paying any, and that level of meeting have not really, come across, the level of like agreeing to both on the government level and the free zone. And of course, most times the free zones may be created by the state governments. So the federal government does not want to hear anything. Like, you know what, you guys are the ones doing your zone, you're on your own. You just pay my whatever thing. But it's also in the interest of the federal government for the state government to have a free zone. Because at the end of the day, it will still bring in production, it's to bring in the export potentials the government really wants at the end of the day. The other thing about it is also in terms of why a number of financiers don't really have much interest is these legal issues. Because at the end of the day, as a banker, as a lender, the major thing that you feel that the free zone brings to your table, right, is the fact that I have rights over the land in itself. So once you don't have that, it becomes a real challenge of moving forward.
Yeah, well, so looks like for us to get this $20 billion that the minister is talking about, there's still a whole lot to put in place and do. And it doesn't look like we're moving that way at this time, but we do hope that government will give it good attention, not just the federal government now. Right. I mean, even the states, subnational, because that's where you have more of the land and more of all of that. All right, thank you so much, Mr. Femi Awofala, Chief Executive Officer of Brickstone Africa. Thank you so much, and we do hope that this conversation goes far so that we'll see the results of it.
Thank you.
We'll take a break now. When we come back, we'll go to another zone, the market zone, here on Business Morning on Channels Television. To stay with us. We're in the market zone now to find out how the markets did yesterday. And I can tell you that the bearish sentiment is still on in the equities market here in Nigeria. Profit-taking activities on Okomu oil, 10% down yesterday. Boa cement, 1.4%. MTN Nigeria. Remember when you say that's when MTN sneezes, the market catches cold? Well, it happened again yesterday. So the oil share dipped almost 0.3%. If we can see the numbers now, 0.29%. That's the number of the drop in the oil share index yesterday. Equity cap 26.723, and there the oil share index is 49,546. But we have Abdul Rashid Momo now joining us to bring out his graph again and tell us where we are. Hi, Mr. Momo. Good morning.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Mr. Momo. Can you hear me?
Yeah, loud and clear.
Awesome. So what's your graph telling you again? So this is the third week. Okay, I don't know how the market is going to close today, but this will be the third week if we don't close in the green today, where we're having one positive every week. Are we going to have one positive this week, or do we expect a positive at the close of trade today?
Well, I've always said when the big boys, when they sneeze, the whole market runs. You know, that's what's been happening.
Yes.
The major players have been the one causing most of the damage so far. Okay, for the past, let's say for the past Monday, Tuesday, since Tuesday, right, the market has been flat between about 49,005 to about, let's say 49,700. As it is now, as we said, we actually need a spike because my target, my range for the market, the safe zone has always been 50,000 points. And the 50,000 benchmark has been broken. Market seems to be doing lower lows and lower highs. But yesterday's close is actually within a resistant level. So any spike that happens now might just take us back to our 50,000 points. If these spikes fail, then I think we might see the beginning of a new downtrend.
Wow.
But that's in the index. But basically, when we look at it in terms of equity, what I've noticed this week has been UBA. UBA has been strong in terms of volume. There's been a lot of activities happening in UBA lately, and I think that those are areas investors should concentrate on for now.
Okay,
Basically,
Mr. Momo.
yeah.
I've always said I think the banking stocks settled. The banking stocks are my favorites.
Because they're always very volatile.
Yes, they're very active.
UBA, FGMB, Fidelity,
Zenith, Access Co, and all
even
of that.
Zenith.
Exactly.
Zenith.
All right.
Zenith has been moving up, but
yeah.
we have some.
Okay, all right.
Level.
Okay, Mr. Momo, thank you so much. We do hope that those are favorites, that they do something to the market today. So at least we have 2 greens. Do enjoy your weekend, Mr. Abdurrashid Momo.
Have a nice.
You too. All right. So let's shift from equities to crypto and see if Ladi has. No, it's normally a red Friday.
It's red. It's red.
It's a red Friday.
It's a red Friday.
Yeah. Oh, there you go.
33.
There you
points.
go.
Fair.
Even worse than yesterday.
Yeah, even worse than yesterday. So it's a huge loss we're seeing in the market.
I think we're not going to stop until Bitcoin gets to 10,000.
Well, 24 hours down 7%
According
already.
to Michael Naji.
Yeah. I'm talking about Michael and Naji.
I'll let you do your thing.
Let's have Michael now. Hello, Michael. I don't know if you can hear me right now, Michael. We're seeing fear in this market right now. Bitcoin lost about 7% in 24 hours. And we see about 30 billion there wiped out from the market cap. Hello, Michael. Can you hear me? We don't have Michael yet. Let's flip over to the market cap now. Let's see what's happening in the market cap. $1 billion down 3.25%. And we see volume traded in Bitcoin, $65.76 billion. That's down about 5.17%. And we see Bitcoin dominance sitting at 40.21%. Let's see what happened with Bitcoin there. We see that 22,000 is trading about 21,000 at this hour. Right now, it's down 0.24%. Volume traded in Bitcoin, $25.88 billion. Let's flip over to Ethereum there. It's lost that 2K mark there, $1,800, 0.58% down. We've seen Ethereum had a good run from the last lows, up about 100% from the low we saw last time. Volume traded $16.50 billion. Let's see if we have Michael now. Do we have Michael? All right, no Michael. All right, let's see what's happening with the top alts by market cap there. Top alts, you see it's all red on that counter there. We're seeing massive losses on the top alts by market cap there. We see BNB there, $289, down 0.77%. And we see eCash there, less than a cent, down 1.17%. It's all red in the markets. We've seen on the top gainers list, we're seeing more of stable coins as we saw yesterday, showing that traders are running for safety at this point. So we're seeing just losses. They're one of the oldies in the market that's up about 9.83%. And flip over to the losers counter, we're seeing double-digit losses this morning with file token there down 14.31%. And we see Lido Dow $2.40, down 13.92%. So it's double-digit losses we're seeing with alts at this time. Once Bitcoin sneezes, the altcoins actually react. So we're seeing the U.S. dollar, the number one culprit again.
What's threatening the dollar?
So we've seen the dollar go up.
It's just moving everything into the red.
Yeah, it's going up. Once the U.S. dollar starts going up, we see the Bitcoin market, we see Bitcoin go down. That's how we see it. That's the indicator that we have right there.
All right, Ladi, thank you. We'll see you at 1:30.
All right.
So that's it on the program today. Thank you so much for being a part of it, the final one for the week. But we're back again on Monday with Business Morning Fresh Conversations. That's what you have from Monday to Friday. But 1:30, Ladi will be here to give you an update from the world of business. And tomorrow, 7 p.m., Will Ebong is back. And she'll be on Capital Market to give you a summary of all of the markets, the equities, the fixed income, the Forex. She will give that to you at 7 p.m. during Capital Market tomorrow. For me, have a great weekend.